I love the parables. A parable of the prodigal son, rewritten in poetic form by Vera McNichol, is described as a feast of reconciliation. The great party thrown to celebrate the prodigal's return would have included the entire village in a feast of reconciliation. Although not everyone is willing to be reconciled. The older brother, who has shown great respect for his father, is angry that his brother is welcomed home. He is so dissatisfied that he insults his father by refusing to accept his father's decision to forgive. He is willing to risk the relationship with his father because of his hostility to his brother. Oh, this parable is a poignant one for many people because it speaks to the heart of our relationships. As we know from our experience, reconciliation is a process that can take time and more time. It's not something that everyone can do at the same pace. The reconciliation described in this parable is fragile, and we are left with many questions at the end of the reading. So let's jump right into the parable and feel what all the characters are feeling. Haven't we all been both brothers? On the one hand, we have made mistakes from which we yearn forgiveness from our loved ones. And on the other hand, we have been the older brother who just can't understand the prodigal's gall to accept something more after squandering the life and blood taken from his father already. Furthermore, I wonder how often the older brother was taken for granted and not given his due at home. Much more told he was loved. The older brother thinks that all this fuss should have been done for him. Just once in a while, my father could have shown appreciation. And in his anger, he rejects the father's reassurance that tells him that all his possessions are his inheritance. Oh, how typical that we can observe dynamics from outside the situation. Many of the feelings I am left with focus around acceptance. Will the older brother accept his father's reassurance of love in time? If we focus upon the Father as God, so we who think similar feelings as the older brother, and by the way, I do, come to realize our feelings of rejection and being taken for granted can ease with love and forgiveness. We will, in time, accept that the love of our Father in heaven offers does include us as well as the sinner. And does the younger brother accept in the long term the reconciliation the Father offers? Is forgiveness so special that our minds can't get around it? He's a partier, this prodigal. Does he see this welcome as just another party, and that's all? Jesus is teaching us that reconciliation is not easy. And it does not make everyone happy all the time. I trust the parable's intent is an awareness that a community or a family must struggle to be reconciling and to be welcoming rather than to be torn apart by division based upon who is worthy of consideration. Tough work for families and for church families. We could become more involved with the parable and become one of the crowd of tax collectors and sinners with whom Jesus sits and tells this parable of God's love for them. Are we grumblers like the Pharisees and scribes? Or are we in solidarity with the sinners? We're taught in church that we are all sinners. But do we really believe that we are? When standing beside rapists and murderers and thieves and women of the night and so on. Isn't there a wee part of us that says, I'm not like that? Some will say eating with pigs is what the prodigal deserves. And some will really believe that they are created in the image of God, thus forgiving of trespasses of others. It's difficult to accept God's grace as freely given to the faithful and the sinner alike. The parable of the reckless son has been called a perfect story. It's not because we can identify with one of the three characters. It's because, if we are honest, we can identify with all three. If you don't agree with me, then I will recommend you for sainthood. If we put ourselves in all the roles, only then can we begin to understand how loving and forgiving God really is. And only then can we understand how far we have to go before we can imitate that love. Can you envision a God who stands at the church gate and welcomes you with open arms? I can. 3 of God's disciples welcomed me this morning, and probably you too, with open arms. When we remain faithful, we are blessed for it. All that God possesses is ours. Any of our dead relationships can rise to new life if we are willing to be reconciled. This parable is a pre-Easter revelation. Just think of the wonderful diversity of people that sit at the banquet of God. The whole image of being welcomed home to a warm hearth or a loving church community fills our heart with hope. A hope that the Father's love will stop at nothing to reclaim his own. The pre-Easter Jesus is one with whom to be reconciled by the Pharisees and the scribes present in the story. Jesus, a Jew of humble birth, schooled in Judaism, teacher of wisdom, healer of pain, rabbi to sinners, disturber of peace, breaker of bread, pourer of wine, forgiver of enemies, griever of friends, crucified and born of the Spirit. We think this little parable is difficult to understand when we jump right into it. We who are God's forgiving people. Jesus always seems to have the last word, though. There is more joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. One sinner who repents. And we read the older brother had a hard time. If we have ears to hear, the parable is calling us to acknowledge our feelings of resentment against those who have gotten away with all kinds of foolishness and frivolity, while we have been faithfully minding the story. I leave you with this difficult parable to contemplate as we journey closer to the cross, knowing it is because of Jesus' shocking behavior that they were forced to mock him, beat, and nail him to the tree. Amen.